Coding with Christ provides elementary educators with a framework to explore coding. Each unit is a set of lessons that explores our faith through a cross-curricular lens. Here, we build upon students' understanding of our faith curriculum, all starting with an interactive storytelling. Then, this story connects through a scripture reading and is introduced through prayer, meditation, or other methods. The resource then provides an unplugged and a plugged coding activity that can be explored with the students using Scratch or Scratch Junior. Finally, there's a consolidation activity that is presented for the educators to expand upon with the students based on what they have done. To learn more about this, please follow our introduction on one of our primary lessons.
This is a short video to support the lessons that have been shared in the kindergarten to grade 3 lessons. Each lesson begins with a rich read aloud that is meant to inspire thinking and learning as it connects to unplugged and plugged coding experiences. If you have a hard copy version of the book, that's great, but if not, a link to an online version of the book is provided in the resource. The read aloud for each grade level is meant to serve as an invitation for learning that can provoke and spark discussions as it relates to unplugged and plugged coding skills, concepts, and language centering on our faith. It can be an introduction to coding or an extension to coding that is already taking place in your classroom. In this book, How to Make an Apple Pie and See the World, the story is about going on an adventure and traveling around God's beautiful world as we are in search of special ingredients that are needed to bake a delicious apple pie at the end of our adventure. Educators can begin to read the pages and invite students to add images or words on a shopping list that will help them remember the order of the ingredients gathered, the name of the ingredient, and the country traveled to in God's beautiful world. You can either use a Jamboard or a whiteboard to model how the shopping list could possibly look like, but students themselves can determine how their shopping list will look like and how they would like to organize their shopping list. Will they begin at the top and work their way down, listing all 7 ingredients? Will they start at the left-hand side of their paper and maybe move along towards the right and so on? Will they decide that a chart will work better for them? Whatever works best for each student so that they can recall the order and each ingredient for future unplugged coding and coding with Scratch Junior. Each of the read alouds provides an opportunity for students to illustrate the storyline through drawings. You will note that in the lessons provided, there is more of an explicit teaching approach outline, but depending on where each educator is in their own coding journey, feel free to take a more open-ended and exploratory approach to the lessons, whatever works best for you in meeting your students where they are in their own learning with coding. These lessons can be in whole group gatherings, small group, one-on-one with students, and also in a think, pair, share approach. Again, whatever works best for you and your students. These lessons are meant to serve as either an introduction to coding for educators as well as students, and can also be extension ideas for coding that are already taking place. Modify as it fits your teaching needs. It is suggested in the first lesson for each grade level from kindergarten to grade 3 that 1 page at a time is read. Educators pause at each page and discuss what is taking place in the story and making some connections to what is being read to a drawing. In this story, we will begin our adventure and traveling to Italy and seeing beautiful fields of wheat. Discussions can center on where Italy is located. Can we find it on a map? Has anyone ever traveled to Italy? What does wheat look like? Educators can share images of wheat and discuss the details as the educator models on a whiteboard or perhaps on chart paper what the wheat looks like. And as the images are shared, a long stem can be noted, and there's these little pockets of wheat that are found at the spike or the head of the plant. And again, you can further research on what that can look like. And then there are these grass-like spikes that come from in between the wheat. Maybe students will decide to label the image with the number. So this is our first ingredient that is gathered in Italy. We may want to encourage students to add the word. Some literacy opportunities can present themselves. Any information, details to image that they feel will help them recall the order and the name of the ingredient. Many extensions can take place in social studies, science, and can become future lessons. Educators can have a map of the world available, and as each ingredient is found, add the drawing on a sticky note and add to that country's location on the map. You will continue on in this way, reading one page at a time as we continue to travel. Our second location is France, where we gather some eggs. Sri Lanka, where we gather some cinnamon bark. Our fourth stop is England, where we will gather some milk. Continuing on to the Indian Ocean, collecting salt. Jamaica is our sixth stop, collecting some sugar. And in this story, we will stop in Vermont and collect our seventh ingredient, which are the apples. We can also modify our story and say that we will be stopping in Ontario, where there are plenty of apple orchards for us to gather our apples needed for our apple pie. From here, we can move to the second lesson with unplugged coding. Educators can either provide an unplugged coding grid on paper, and students add in with pencil or other unplugged coding experiences, such as a grid that's outlined with chalk outdoors, or maybe paper placed on the floor using arrows on sticky notes or paper, or loose parts and other tangible materials to represent the images in the story. There are endless creative possibilities to unplugged coding experiences, and additional ideas are shared in the resource. Again, educators can provide an explicit, more direct teaching approach, especially if it's an introduction to coding and students follow along to what the educator is modeling. Or you can provide a more open-ended opportunity for students, and they can choose where the start of the journey begins and the directions followed to arrive at the location in the order traveled in the story, and the ingredient that is picked up first, second, third, and so on until all 7 ingredients have been gathered as they follow the sequence pattern that repeats: forward, forward, pick up, turn. Here we will start at the bottom right. Students can do the same or can choose the location to start. You decide the best approach that you would like to take with your students, following either forward left, forward right, forward up, or forward down in the sequence pattern forward, forward, pick up, turn. So here we will begin on the bottom left location. This is our start or our go green symbol, and we will move in this example forward right, talk about the direction that the arrow is going and how you are moving on this grid. Forward right 2 times. Here we will pick up the first ingredient, which is the wheat. They can draw that in, and you can model what that looks like, doing your best to make it fit inside this grid. Again, if your unplugged coding grid happens to be something more tangible, you can place an item or a loose part material on this location to indicate that you are picking up the first ingredient, the wheat, that we travel to and find in our first location, which is Italy. Then we will turn. Here is our corner turn, showing that we are going forward, up, forward, up. We're going to pick up our second ingredient, which is the egg in France. And here the students can decide if they would continue on with forward, forward, left, or forward, forward, right. Whatever they choose, so that they can continue on with the sequence pattern of forward, forward, pick up the third ingredient and turn until we arrive at the end location where we gather our apples and bake our delicious apple pie. In this case, we will move forward right. Our corner turn indicates forward right, picking up our third ingredient, which if we were to refer to our shopping list that the students have, it would be the bark that we find, the cinnamon bark that we find in Sri Lanka. We can do a corner turn, moving upward to our forward, up, and now we will turn and we will continue on forward, left, and in this case, this is where we would indicate that this is where we will stop. In the lesson provided, we are only reaching 4 ingredients or 4 locations where we can enjoy that delicious apple pie. It's where we find the apples for our apple pie, and this is where our sequence pattern will end. We continue on in this way until we reach this final location. Again, if students were invited to find all 7 ingredients, it would look different of where our end or our apple or our final destination or location is. This is how it might look like on paper, unplugged grid, and if using other unplugged grids, it can look like a grid made with masking tape on a tabletop, or a grid made using papers on the floor and adding in loose parts and other tangible, movable materials to represent the ingredients. Additional unplugged coding grid ideas are shared in the resource. This unplugged coding experience can then be transferred to our coding sequence in Scratch Junior, which is provided in Lesson 3. Happy coding!